I want you to begin today with the struggle to cling to God, when life is easy. You said it like this, quote, I wonder if with all the sermons and books on how to hold on to God during suffering, if there should be just as much, if not more, on how to stay near God during seasons of ease. I've seen more Christians drift from God when life was a breeze than I have when life was hard. Wow. Expand on that truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I've seen in my life where when I'm going through something, when there are trials and tribulations and difficulties and hardships, I seem to be a lot more attentive to God than I am when life is kind of easy. And I think I saw it in the scriptures when I was studying for Deuteronomy 5 when I taught at the Gospel Coalition Women's Conference. And in Deuteronomy 8, there was this section where God was telling them how he's bringing them into a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. You know, you got water, you don't have manna anymore, like all of this type of stuff. And then God says, take care lest you forget the Lord your God when you enter this good land. And then he says, like, when you get there, don't assume that all the good stuff is yours. And so I think in essence, that's what we're all prone to do, is that when we enter into seasons where things seem to be abounding, where there seems to be an abundance, where we're not crying a lot, we're not depressed, there's just a lot of joy, everybody's good, your spouse ain't getting on your nerves, your kids are being real obedient, your paycheck is coming in consistently, there's this tendency to just forget about God, to remember that these good gifts are about God, that these good gifts are for God, that these good gifts came from God. And so I think that's what we do as humans. But even Paul, I feel like he has encouraged me personally when I was reading Philippians 4, I think, where he talks about how he's learned to be abased and abound. He's learned to have lack and abundance, all because he gets his strength from the Lord. And I think a lot of times we read that text to say, oh, I'm struggling with stuff, I need God's strength. But it's like, no, even when you're not struggling, you need God's strength, because in essence, you are completely and always needy. But when you have a lot of good things going on in your life, I think you forget you're as needy as you are. And so I think if we keep Jesus before our eyes and see that we always need him, whatever season we are in, then we'll be able to resist the temptation to stray from him when life is all good.
Yeah, really good and helpful. I mean, this seems like the flip side of Psalm 73. I mean, the prosperity gospel, really. If my life is a breeze, then God must be happy with me.
Well, no. I think God's kindness is layered. I think God's kindness looks different depending on the season. I think when you look at Jesus, Jesus was the most pleasing thing to God, and his life was really hard. And so I could never assume that my suffering or the lack thereof is somehow related to God's view of me or affection for me. He is always good, and he always loves me because I am in Christ Jesus and he created me for himself. And so I think, if anything, what I've learned about the character of God in my trials is that God, he really wants me to know him, and he's willing to do that by any means necessary. If that means pain, then he's willing to do that. Because really in my suffering, that's when I look the most like Jesus, because I'm able to see him rightly, you know?
Yeah, that's so true. There's an urgency we must cling to, especially when life seems easy.